I don't care what the manual specifies. I care what the invoice says. This part is unauthorized. You're done. Get your things. I did not flinch. I did not argue. My hands, stained with the honest grease of a day's work, simply stopped moving. I held the offending spark plug, a tiny piece of ceramic and metal worth exactly $3.47, in my palm. It felt heavier than it should. She stood there, Evelyn Reed, CEO of Oracle Aviation, her tailored suit, a stark, sterile gray, against the vibrant life of the hangar. Her heels clicked on the polished concrete, an impatient sound, a sound that didn't belong among the patient hum of turbines and the slow, deliberate work of men who understood them. I looked from her face, a mask of corporate certainty, to the massive engine cowling of the Gulfstream G650 before me, its sleek lines promising flight, power, and freedom. She saw a line item on a budget. I saw a beating heart of metal and fire that had to carry human beings safely through the thin, cold air at 40,000 feet. She thought she was saving her company from a rogue mechanic. She thought she was making a point about procedure and control. In exactly 7 hours, she would learn the real cost of a $3 part, and it would have nothing to do with the invoice. To understand what happened that Tuesday, you have to understand the silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the deep, resonant silence of a machine that is perfectly tuned. It's a quiet that lives inside the noise. My father taught me that. He was an automotive mechanic, a magician with pistons and gears. He could listen to an engine block with a wooden dowel pressed to his ear and tell you which valve was thinking about sticking, weeks before it ever would. "The machine tells you what it needs, Marcus," he'd say, his voice a low rumble like a well-maintained V8. "It speaks in vibrations, in heat, in silence. Most people are too busy listening to themselves to hear it." He left me 2 things when he passed: that piece of wisdom and his old Starrett micrometer. It was heavy, cold, and perfect. A tool for measuring tolerances down to the 10,000th of an inch, a tool for finding the truth. I brought that philosophy with me from the garage to the hangar. An aircraft is just a more complicated engine with wings. It speaks a more complex language, but it still speaks. For 12 years, I had been its interpreter at Oracle Aviation. I wasn't just a mechanic, I was a diagnostician. I held the highest A&P ratings with additional avionics certifications. I was the one they called when the computer said everything was fine, but the pilot felt a ghost in the controls. I was the one who could stand on the tarmac, close my eyes, and hear the subtle arrhythmia in a turbine spinning up that signaled the bearing was nearing the end of its life cycle. The hangar was my cathedral, a vast echoing space, filled with the smell of hydraulic fluid, jet fuel, and ozone. Light streamed down from massive skylights, illuminating the fleet of 10 pristine executive jets. They were monuments to wealth and speed, but to me they were living things. Each had a personality, a history, logged in meticulous maintenance records and in the feel of its fuselage under my hand. I knew N700RA, the flagship G650, had a slight shudder in its number 2 engine during rollback that wasn't in any manual. I knew the Falcon 8X. N701RA had a finicky galley water pump that would trip its breaker if you looked at it wrong. My daughter Maya loved the hangar. She was 7. On the rare Saturday I had to come in, I'd bring her. She'd sit on a stool, her small legs swinging, and draw pictures of planes with smiling faces while I worked. She understood the sanctity of the place. She never ran. She never shouted. She just watched, her eyes wide with a quiet awe that I still felt every single morning I walked through the massive sliding doors. She was the reason I was here. Every bolt I torqued, every wire I secured was for her. A single father's promise written in safety wire and hydraulic seals. That Tuesday started like any other. 06:00 hours. The air was cool and crisp. I was performing a scheduled 100-hour inspection on N700RA. It was meticulous, painstaking work. You develop a rhythm, a flow. You don't just look, you see. You don't just touch, you feel. The work is a conversation. While inspecting the ignition system on the starboard engine, I found it. Spark plug number 7. The electrode showed early signs of fouling, a subtle discoloration that the diagnostic computer would miss for another 50 hours of flight time, but I could see it. The machine was whispering. The OEM plugs, the ones mandated by the manufacturer and by extension by Miss Reed's procurement department, had a known issue in high humidity environments. A small flaw in the ceramic insulator. It was a minor issue, one the manufacturer would never admit to because a recall would cost millions. But mechanics talk. We share knowledge in forums and late-night calls. We knew. There was another part, a military spec plug made by a small firm in Ohio. It cost $1 more. It was built to a higher tolerance. It didn't have the flaw. Using it was a deviation from the official maintenance manual, but it was the right thing to do for the health of the engine and the safety of the people inside. It was a decision based on experience, on listening to the machine. I made the swap. I logged it, noting the part number and the reason for the deviation. I was being transparent. I was doing my job. That was my mistake. Not the swap itself, but believing that competence and integrity would be recognized, let alone valued. At 14:30 hours, Miss Reed descended from her glass-walled office overlooking the hangar floor. She wasn't an aviation person. She was a finance person brought in to maximize profits. She saw the jets, not as marvels of engineering, but as assets on a balance sheet. She was trailed by a nervous-looking floor manager and a young apprentice named Leo. Leo was a good kid, eager, smart. He watched me work with a quiet intensity, always asking the right questions. He reminded me of myself 20 years ago. Reed's eyes scanned the hangar like a hawk searching for prey. She didn't see the gleaming aircraft or the dedicated crew. She saw inefficiencies. Her gaze landed on my workstation, on the open maintenance log for N700RA. She picked up the tablet, her finger tracing the lines of my report. Her eyes narrowed. Part number 77B-4, she said, her voice cutting through the low hum of the hangar. That's not an approved OEM part. The floor manager, a man named Henderson who usually trusted my judgment without question, shifted his weight. Marcus is our lead tech, Miss Reed. He's the best we have. If he made a call, I'm not asking for his resume, Henderson, she snapped. I'm asking about a deviation from company policy, a policy I signed off on myself 2 months ago. All parts must be OEM source. No exceptions. It streamlines purchasing and ensures warranty compliance. I wiped my hands slowly on a clean red rag, folding it neatly before placing it on my toolbox. I met her gaze. Ms. Reed, the OEM plugs have a tendency to foul prematurely in this engine model. It's a known issue among technicians. This part is functionally identical, but built to a higher specification. It eliminates the risk. She scoffed, a small, sharp sound of disbelief. The risk? The manufacturer guarantees the safety of their parts. Are you suggesting you know more than the multi-billion-dollar corporation that designed this engine? I know what this specific engine is telling me, I said, my voice even calm. And what is it telling you? That it needs you to spend an extra $1.22 per plug without authorization. She held up the invoice I had submitted. This is about process. It is about control. If I let a mechanic make a $3 decision, what's next? A $30,000 decision. Where does it end? Leo watched, his face pale. He was learning a lesson, but not the one Ms. Reed intended. He was learning that in some places, doing the right thing and doing what you are told are two very different paths. It ends with a safer aircraft, I said simply. That was when she said it, the line that severed my 12 years of service. I don't care what the manual specifies. I care what the invoice says. This part is unauthorized. You're done. Get your things. Henderson started to protest, but Reed shot him a look that froze the words in his throat. I just nodded. There was no anger in me. There was a profound, cold clarity, a sense of disappointment, but also of inevitability. You cannot reason with a person who is not listening. You cannot explain the silence to someone who only hears the noise of their own authority. I turned to my toolbox, the big red rolling chest that had been my partner for over a decade. I began to wipe down my tools one by one with a clean, oil-scented cloth. The weight of each wrench, each screwdriver, was familiar, comforting. Leo approached me, his voice barely a whisper. "Marcus, I'm sorry. That wasn't right." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just do good work, Leo. Listen to the machine." I packed my personal effects. A photo of Maya taped inside the toolbox lid. My father's micrometer in its worn wooden case. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I simply erased myself from the place I had helped build. As I walked toward the door, I passed N700RA. I ran my hand along its fuselage, a silent goodbye. The cold aluminum felt like a living thing under my palm. It knew. The security guard at the gate was apologetic as he took my ID badge. I watched the hangar doors slide shut in my rearview mirror, the Oracle Aviation logo shrinking until it was gone. The silence in my truck was different. It wasn't the silence of a well-tuned machine. It was the silence of an ending. I was home by 1600 hours, just in time to meet Maya's school bus. She ran into my arms, all sunshine and missing teeth. "Daddy, can we build my LEGO rocket tonight? We can build a whole space station," I said, lifting her up. In that moment, holding my daughter, the hangar and the jets, and Evelyn Reed felt a million miles away. We did homework, we made spaghetti, we started construction on a magnificent multi-stage Lego rocket. The world shrank to the size of our small, warm kitchen. There was no hum of turbines, just the sound of Maya's laughter and the quiet click of plastic bricks snapping together. It was a different kind of well-tuned machine. It was my life. The first call came at 1847 hours. It was Henderson, the floor manager. His voice was tight with stress. "Marcus, hey. Listen, we've got a problem." "I don't work there anymore, Henderson," I said, my voice neutral. I was helping Maya glue a fin onto her rocket. I know, but this is weird." The whole fleet just went dark. Dark? The FMS, the Fleet Management System. It's completely locked down. Every terminal is showing a red screen. System-wide diagnostic lockdown. No flight plans can be filed. No engines can be started. It's a brick. The entire fleet is grounded. I looked at the Lego rocket. Did anyone make any unauthorized hardware changes today? There was a pause. What? No, of course not. Well, the only thing was that spark plug. We swapped it back to the OEM part on N700RA, just like she wanted. Logged it and everything. "There's your problem then," I said. "What are you talking about? It's a spark plug." "How can a spark plug take down a $10 million software suite?" "It can't," I said, "but the system can." The FMS at Oracle Aviation wasn't an off-the-shelf product. It was my design. 3 years ago, after a near-miss incident caused by a counterfeit part making its way into the supply chain, I had proposed a new system. I spent nights and weekends for 6 months building it. It was a holistic, diagnostic and logistics network that integrated every aspect of the fleet's maintenance. It tracked every part, every flight hour, every repair. But it had a core security feature, a silent guardian that I had built into its base code. I called it the Integrity Protocol. The protocol was simple. The system maintained a perfect one-to-one digital twin of every aircraft, down to the last rivet and resistor. When a mechanic replaced a part, they logged it, and the digital twin was updated. The system then verified the part against a database of approved components. But I had gone a step further. I had added a secondary verification layer for a few dozen critical components, parts that were small, cheap, but could cause catastrophic failure, parts that were often targets for counterfeiters or cost-cutting, parts like spark plugs. If the system detected one of my designated integrity-critical parts being replaced with a component that I had flagged in the BEDCHR as substandard or problematic like the OEM spark plug for that specific engine, it wouldn't reject it immediately. That would be too obvious. Instead, it would start a silent 4-hour countdown. It was a cooling-off period, a chance for the mechanic to realize their error and correct it. If the change wasn't reversed within that window, the protocol would assume a systemic failure in maintenance oversight or a deliberate act of sabotage. It would then do exactly what it was designed to do: protect the assets and the lives they carried. It would trigger a fleet-wide hard lockdown. It would ground everything until someone with the highest level administrative override, which was just me, could physically inspect the aircraft and clear the code. I had presented the full functionality to the old CEO. He had understood the necessity of it. He saw it not as a constraint, but as the ultimate safety net. But Evelyn Reed had never bothered to read the full technical specifications. She had just seen the licensing fee I was paid for its upkeep and tried to have her IT department reverse engineer it to cut costs. They had failed. "Marcus, you have to help us," Henderson pleaded. "There's a hurricane building in the Atlantic. We have 3 client families we need to evacuate from a private island in the Bahamas. Reed is losing her mind. She's talking about millions in liability. Tell her to check the invoice," I said, and gently hung up the phone. Maya looked up at me. "Who was that, Daddy?" "Just someone from my old job," I said, smiling. "Now, does this command module look right to you?" The second call came at 2012 hours. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A message popped up a minute later. It was the head of the legal department. His voice was a strained, artificial calm. He talked about contractual obligations and duty of care. He mentioned my FMS licensing agreement. I deleted the message. The contract stipulated that I maintain the system. It did not stipulate that I had to protect the company from its own incompetence. The system was functioning perfectly. It was doing its job. At 21:30 hours, there was a knock at my door. I was reading Maya a bedtime story about a girl who travels to the stars. I looked through the peephole. A long black sedan was parked at the curb, its engine idling. Standing on my small concrete porch, illuminated by the single yellow bulb, was Evelyn Reed. Her immaculate gray suit was rumpled. Her carefully composed face was a mess of panic and fury. The hunter had become the hunted. I finished the chapter, kissed Maya goodnight, and turned on her star projector. Tiny galaxies swirled across her ceiling. I went to the door and opened it. I didn't speak. I just stood there, filling the doorway. "The fleet is grounded," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, spat out like something bitter. I waited. The silence stretched. The chirping of crickets filled the night air. "The FMS, it's your system. They told me it's locked, some kind of protocol." I remained silent. I held my father's micrometer in my hand. I'd been cleaning it at the kitchen table. The weight of the steel was cool and steadying. "This is extortion," she hissed. "You did this. You sabotaged us because I fired you." "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. It was the first time I had spoken. "You sabotaged yourself. The system is operating exactly as designed. It's preventing a potentially unsafe aircraft from flying. That's its job." "An unsafe aircraft? Over a $3 spark plug? That's insane." "The spark plug was the symptom," I said. "It was the test. A test of whether procedure was more important than judgment. Your procedure failed the test. The system is designed to catch that failure." I looked past her at the black car, at the world she represented. "The system works. The problem is with the management." Her certainty finally cracked. The mask fell away, and for a second I saw raw, desperate fear in her eyes. The hurricane, the clients, the millions of dollars bleeding away with every second her jets sat silent on the tarmac. Her career was flashing before her eyes. "Fix it," she said, her voice dropping to a plea. "I need you to fix it. Name your price. I'll pay it. I'll give you your job back." "My job is not for sale, Ms. Reed, and I already have a job. I'm a father." I glanced back toward Maya's room. "Some things don't have a price tag." "Then what do you want?" she cried, her voice breaking. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want money. I wanted acknowledgement. Not for me, but for the principle, for the work itself, for the silent, vital knowledge that people like her dismissed as a line item. "I want a new contract," I said. "Not with Oracle Aviation. With the board of directors. A new, independent firm. My firm. It will be responsible for final airworthiness directives and maintenance oversight for the entire fleet." My decisions will be final, not subject to approval from a finance department. My firm will be paid a consulting fee of $300,000 per year. And I want a written apology, not to me, to my crew, to Leo, to Henderson, to every mechanic in that hangar. An apology for questioning their professionalism and prioritizing cost over safety. She stared at me, aghast. That's impossible. The planes are on the ground, miss. Reed, I said. They will not fly again until the system is reset. I am the only one who can do that. You seem to be in a very possible position. You have my terms. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence of 10 grounded multi-million-dollar jets was shouting for me. She stood there, on my porch, in my world, and for the first time, she had no power. She was just a woman who had made a very, very bad decision. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking. She made a call. I heard her choked, furious voice speaking to, I assumed, the chairman of the board. I didn't listen to the details. I didn't need to. I had already won. I went back inside, leaving the door open. I walked to my kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I could hear the murmur of her conversation, the frantic, pleading tone. 5 minutes later, she appeared in the doorway of my kitchen. Her face was pale, defeated. They agreed, she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Everything. The contract will be drafted by morning. Now, will you please fix it? I will, I said. Get in your car. I'll follow you. I didn't drive back to Oracle Aviation in her chauffeured sedan. I drove my own 10-year-old truck. I needed the familiar rumble of its engine, the feel of my own hands on my own steering wheel. When I arrived, the hangar was a hive of frantic, useless activity. Executives in suits were yelling into phones. The entire night shift of mechanics was standing by, helpless. They all stopped when I walked in. A hush fell over the massive space. Evelyn Reed was waiting for me. A forced, brittle composure plastered on her face. She tried to lead me toward the main office. I ignored her. I walked directly to the central server room, a glass-walled enclosure in the center of the hangar floor. Henderson and Leo were there, standing by the main terminal, which glowed with an angry, uniform red. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. He understood. This wasn't about me coming back. This was about the work being respected. I sat down at the terminal. Reed and a handful of other executives crowded behind me, peering over my shoulder. The screen showed a single line of text against the red background. System lockdown. Initiated. Integrity Protocol 77B. Poor. Awaiting. Override. I typed a single command. It wasn't a long, complicated password. It was a question. Query, is the machine safe? The system responded, response. Negative. Unauthorized hardware detected. N700, Ray. Engine 2, ignition 7. Risk of premature component failure under thermal load. The machine was still talking, still whispering its truth. I looked at Henderson. Go back to N700RA. Reinstall the part I put in this morning. The military spec plug. Log it properly. Henderson nodded, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. He and Leo hurried off. Reed started to object, to say something about procedure, but she stopped herself. She had no more moves to make. We waited. 10 minutes later, Henderson's voice came over the hangar intercom. Marcus, it's done. I turned back to the screen. I typed another command, verify. N700, RANG, 2 IGN7. The system processed for a moment. Then, new text appeared. Verification complete. Authorized component. Detected system integrity restored. I typed the final override. It wasn't a code, it was a name. Moi. The red screen flickered. For a heart-stopping second, it went black. Then, it flashed green. Every terminal in the hangar, on the tarmac, and in the control tower blinked to life. Flight plans appeared. Engine diagnostics showed all green. The lockdown was over. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. From across the hangar, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the The slow, whining spool-up of a jet turbine engine. The pilots were already beginning their pre-flight checks. The silence was broken. I stood up from the chair. I didn't look at Evelyn Reed. I didn't say a word to anyone. My work was done. I walked out of the server room and headed for the exit. As I passed my old workstation, I saw my main toolbox still sitting there, exactly as I'd left it. I opened the top lid, took out the worn wooden case containing my father's micrometer, and placed it on the bench. I walked out of the hangar and didn't look back. I got in my truck and drove home. The eastern sky was just beginning to turn a soft, hopeful gray. 6 months later, I was standing not in a hangar, but in a small, clean office, with a window that overlooked a regional airport. The sign on the door read, Aviation, Integrity Consulting. Thorne Proprietor. My firm now held oversight contracts for 3 different corporate fleets. My job wasn't to turn wrenches anymore. It was to listen, to interpret, to ensure that the people who owned the machines respected what the machines were telling them. Evelyn Reed was removed as CEO by the Oracle board less than a month after the lockdown. I read in a trade journal that she took a position at a venture capital firm, a place where mistakes are measured only in dollars, not in lives. Oracle Aviation was restructured and eventually sold to a larger competitor 2 months ago. The name no longer exists. I got a text from Leo last week. It was a picture of him standing next to the landing gear of a G650. He had been promoted to lead mechanic. In his hand he was holding my father's micrometer. The caption just said, listening. My father always said, the machine tells you what it needs. You just have to listen. Evelyn Reed heard the cost of a $3 spark plug. She listened to the noise of an invoice. I listened to the engine. The engine was whispering about a potential failure at 30,000 feet over a dark ocean. The difference between those two sounds, the noise and the whisper, is everything. Some people in this world are trained to see only what things cost. They can calculate risk and profit to the 10th of a decimal point. But they can never understand what a thing is truly worth. They can't measure the value of integrity, of experience, of a quiet promise between a man and a machine. That value can't be logged on a balance sheet, but its absence can ground a fleet, or, worse, make one fall from the sky. This afternoon, I picked Maya up from school. We went to the park behind our house, a big, open field. I had brought the kite we bought last weekend. The wind was perfect, a steady, invisible river flowing across the grass. I held the kite up, and she held the string. I let go, and the wind took it. It climbed, a bright yellow diamond against the deep blue sky, soaring higher and higher. Maya laughed, her face turned up to the sun, a picture of pure, simple joy. The kite wasn't a complex machine. It was just fabric and string. But it was flying, it was safe, and it was free. We all have a choice about what we listen to in our lives. The loud demands of the urgent or the quiet truths of the important. Choose wisely.